Hi everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, checking in with a weekly garden tour. Well, May has come and gone. We are now into June, counting sadly down the days to the solstice, and then we actually will start to decrease in day length, which is always a little bit sad for me. I like increased days. And I am also heading out of town for actually over a week, going to Athens, Georgia, then on to Russellville, Arkansas, and then over to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I won't have as many videos to post this week because, well, I simply won't be at home. Thankfully, Emily and Jordan and Aiden will all be here getting things accomplished in the garden. So when I get back, hopefully a lot more seed will be collected and we will get started on really transitioning the cottage garden beds for the summer season. But without further ado, let me turn this camera around and we will take a stroll through the backyard in this first part of my weekly garden tour. Well, despite it looking a little floppy, I love the color combinations that you see here with the Reese poppies and the echinacea and a dahlia that has started to bloom already, which did perennialize successfully. Of course, we've got larkspur that's still in bloom, and all the lettuce is starting to bolt. That'll be in flower soon. And in here you can also see that those nasturtiums that I did back in April that I direct seeded are also flowering, and they're all different colors, from yellow to orangey red to this really beautiful soft yellow with like a burgundy throat. I'm so impressed with the nasturtiums. I definitely think that April seeding is the best, at least that I've ever experienced here in Zone 7, Central North Carolina. I cannot believe how fast these tomatoes have grown in the tower garden. So, you know, I'm just waiting for them to stretch a little bit more so we can start attaching them to the cattle fence here. And all of the sun-credible sunflowers, which are going to go into the back side border, are starting to flower. And I'm really glad I got these when I did, because they were almost completely sold out yesterday when we were at Johnson Nursery doing our grain to oven run through. I do hope that you will watch that video and consider registering for one of the classes. I'm really excited about these. I think it's a really unique, one-of-a-kind experience. And if you click the link in the description, you will find that I am going to actually be there on Friday, June 16th, and then Sunday, June 25th. They are also holding classes at other times. Those are the two dates that I had open. So I hope you'll consider joining me and attending one of our grain to oven experiences. They really are such a cool way to understand and gain a greater appreciation for like a central food source, also known as wheat. Of course, I can't go down to Johnson Nursery and not plant shop. So next thing on my list to do is get all of these coleus planted. This is obviously one from Proven Winners that is called Color Blaze Torchlight. And I think it's gonna look really good. I like the dark burgundy with the blue of the pool. So they're bigger holes than I would like to dig, but it's the size they had, and I think it's gonna give us some pretty great instant gratification. Along with that, I'm gonna plant some gomphrena just to sort of add a little touch of interest. So I've got a couple of gomphrena that are going to go here sort of along the back side of the pool. Now, I have been busy collecting seed today. Today was our first day that actually felt like summer. I'm so relieved. And the poppies are drying out really quickly. I've done several passes, and every time I see more that are ready to be harvested. And basically the sign is those little holes opening. And I especially am looking for plants that are dried out. So this is actually a prime example here. You see this poppy pod is kind of hard. That's ideally what I'm looking for, because if there's too much moisture in the pod, it can still rot when you turn it upside down in the bucket. Now I did want to show you that gladiolas have started blooming here. And these are ones that I planted several years ago. I just bought them from, I think, Aldi. And you can see there's lots more coming, great big spikes. And in this border, you can see that the cilantro is just starting to flower. So it's still gonna be a kind of a succession of harvesting the seeds. And you know, it's really just because we had so much rain last weekend that everything is sort of flopping over. Which is a shame, but it's just part of the reality of it. Now it is full on blueberry season here, and I have about 28 different cultivars of blueberry. So I have great extended harvests, but these are absolutely delicious. The birds are stealing them, so I've instructed Emily in my absence to come out and harvest as many as she can. Because we have plenty to share with the birds, but I still like to have a few gallons frozen so that I can use them later on throughout the season. Now that border, there's still poppies blooming. This is definitely the latest that I've ever had poppies flowering. And I need to come through and harvest the broccoli because if I don't, it'll just bolt and stretch. Now I had already harvested the main one off of this, so these are side shoots. I'm just gonna come through and break them off, and they're tender and delicious. And well, it's my favorite vegetable of all time. I'm gonna enjoy eating these for dinner. Now over here in my work zone, I have a bunch of stuff potted. These are peppers and eggplants and sweet potatoes that I had in the greenhouse, and it's still gonna probably be at least 2 weeks before we get the borders cleared and replanted. So I figured instead of torturing these things in the shady greenhouse, pot them up, get them growing so that they'll be that much bigger when we do get them installed in the ground. You can see the Thailand giants look great. These cannas, which I'm trialing, are really quite beautiful. They're flowering. I'm not exactly sure how tall they're supposed to get. My plan was to just sink the pots in the ground because my experience with cannas is that they are fully hardy here and they can take up a lot of real estate. So that's all, this is all kind of inspiration for the summer borders. Now behind here, you can see, I just love how the echinaceas look with that pale white from the cilantro. And to still have the Reese poppies in bloom. And here's prime example of finches opening the poppy pods up and stealing the seeds. I'm trying to let the finches have some, but not steal all. That's fair, right? And you can see a lot is still blooming here, carrots and larkspur. The wheat is looking good. The birds are eating the wheat seeds pretty effectively. Just totally good. And all of this nigella in here, it's just so beautiful and cool and calming. All of these shades of blue and purple and white. I could not have planned it better myself, and I didn't, because remember, most of this was self-sown. And again, just think there is so much to be said for the magic of letting plants grow where they want to grow. And well, to have a scene that looks like this that I didn't really have to construct makes me feel like I am a successful gardener. Now you can see champagne cryptomeria is really showing off. I love the white tips. And that rose is really quite pretty. That is one from Bailey Nurseries. I think it's called Funny Face. I would need to find a label. It's a little hard to get in there right now. And we don't really have any ripe nigella yet, but there's going to be a ton of seed. So be sure to stay tuned as we continue to put out more and more videos about the seed harvesting process. It definitely takes several weeks, and with the mild weather that we've had, it's just proving to take longer than usual. We are in gardenia season. And though they really took a hit at the holiday freeze, I'm pleased to see that there are so many that are blooming. And I just have to acknowledge how absolutely incredible that Coralopsis is. You know, with the witch hazel over top and the limelight hydrangea next to it. You know, to me, this is what a shrub border is all about. It's meant to have everything growing in together. It's very, very low maintenance, but high impact. Now here along the fence line, you could see that these plants flopped pretty severely. I think for next year, what I'm gonna do is actually put short cattle fence throughout, layered throughout, so that that'll help keep everything more upright, not falling over and lodging. I do have this trial pumpkin that's starting to go bonkers, and I think I've decided I'm gonna go ahead and plant it in the pot, just like dig the pot into the ground right here. This is easy to water. It'll root through, but if we need to move it later on, it'll be easier to move it in the container versus digging it up and like bare rooting it by accident. It's doing so well, and this must be related in some way to the Seminole pumpkin because it's got that purposeful silvering, and that usually is an indicator that they are borer resistant and powdery mildew resistant. So that's a really important quality in a pumpkin here in the Southeast. Now lots of seed to come from this border. Not a lot is ripe yet, and you can see there are still poppies that are going to be blooming. And you know, when the poppies look like this, they're not ripe. Leave them alone. They've got to turn tan with the little openings. And even at this stage, that's not ripe yet, because see, there's no visible openings. I'm searching for an example of one that is ripe, but there probably aren't any because I have been doing a good job today of collecting. I do see some ripe ones on the Papaver somniferum, so we'll go over this one more time. This is ripe. You see it's tan and it's got the little holes. But literally right next to it is one that is green with no holes. This one is not ripe. So, ripe, unripe. Of course, behind that, I've got an absolutely fabulous gladiolus. And one of the reasons I love to grow gladiolus is simple. My grandmother's brother was a gladiolus breeder in the Czech Republic. And I love that I have that sort of heritage in my family. I did want to acknowledge that I do have a couple of hydrangeas that are blooming. I don't actually know what is going on here. It's kind of interesting. And I don't remember what variety this is, so forgive me. It isn't a great bloomer, but the fact that it has some blooms is good. And you can see that the black runner colocasia is doing what it does, kind of filling in the edge of the woodland. And behind it is like an old-fashioned, I don't know whether this is PD. It's just an old-fashioned Hydrangea macrophylla. Probably it's the placement that makes it so reliable in here, under the woods, in the swamp. This is the main hydrangea that blooms consistently for me. I know I said I was going to do a hydrangea tour, but I've run out of time. I do have another Hydrangea serrata that's blooming back there, that's variegated. I'll confess y'all, I'm not walking back here because I'm a little afraid of snakes at this time of year, and you can see it's a solid ground cover. I don't want to step on a snake. Another plant that really stands out in the woodland is that Oryxia japonica pearl frost. That's that big variegated plant right there. Really outstanding. And then of course the conifer above that is a metasequoia, not a taxodium. But I wanted to show you over here because this hydrangea, which has a couple of different names, but I think Runaway Bride is one of them, is also starting to flower, which is pretty exciting. It's a beautiful double bloom and pretty consistently pale white It kind of looks a little bit like it has a tiny tinge of blue back here. So remember, the Hydrangea macrophylla are pH sensitive, but I'm really pleased to see a few blooms. It's certainly not covered in flowers, as you can see, but this is sort of the story with growing hydrangeas here in the Piedmont, North Carolina. Well, I stopped doing what I was doing to make this tour before it got too late. And I just wanted to show you how the borders over here are looking. You can see the Egyptian walking onions are doing their thing. They're highly divisible. Basically, anyone who visits me leaves with some. They're great for helping deter animals, so that's really useful. And the poppies are drying out here really quickly, which I'm so relieved about, because I'd really like to get these 100-gallon root pouches cleaned up and replanted. I have got all kinds of tomatoes that I want to plant in here, and you can see maybe midweek we'll be able to have this section cleaned out. I'm home for one day in between trips. And I have a lot scheduled for that one day, so we'll see how far along the poppy seeds are. When you might remember that I did sow a bunch of tomatoes, and this is what I have left. They're looking a little nutrient starved. They're well rooted. They're ready to be planted. I'm not going to fertilize them until I actually get them planted. So fingers crossed, sooner than later. I've got some of my absolute favorite varieties and some new to me ones. Thornbird's terracotta I've never grown. Blueberries is a really great cherry tomato. Rutgers. Orange icicle is a fantastic orange Roma type. And then this is an entire tray of cream sausage, which is hands down my all-time favorite tomato. I wanted to show you a progress report on some of the cauliflower that was planted. I believe this was seeded in February, and they are starting to develop. Now this is a very shady area, which is helping, but look, that's a pretty good one. So I'm hoping that I'll get some, decent sized cauliflowers. They're all producing, but at this stage they might not get much larger because the heat definitely influences their heading ability. And in this border as well, I hope you guys will be proud. Look at, I am making it a walkway again. And in part it's because I wanted to come in and get to the raspberries. There are so many raspberries here. This is Heritage. My former intern from 2019, Flora, who has the really cute corgi, she gave me these, and I was hesitant about planting them because I know that raspberries can spread really a lot, and they're filling these 100-gallon root pouches, but I think that's cool. I like having these raspberries to be able to harvest from. And I'm also really excited that we have a walkway here. Well, you might notice that the figs look a lot less than they did last week. And that is because I took the pruners to them. And I think that it's for the best. It's definitely giving this bed a lot more sunlight, and specifically all of these tomato plants, they don't have this solid wall of shade behind them. The tomatoes are doing really, really well. These are all grafted varieties. And of course, they're all growing in veggie mix from Soil Cube. Hands down, the best soil that you could possibly be growing vegetables in. And you'll also notice that I removed a blueberry, and that was the blueberry that I've been struggling with for the last few years, that showing an iron deficiency just because of an increase in the pH due to the groundwater. There's very little I can do to control the water coming up from underneath. So I've just decided to go ahead, and as the blueberries start to look bad, I'm just gonna remove them. I'm gonna plant more on the next door property on higher ground. Instead of putting them in the backyard, I'm gonna put them in the front yard. Now into the fire pit. Of course, the succulents look awesome. I have mangaves on my list. So we have a bunch of mangaves to bring here, but we still have some maintenance to do. But you can see all of these pots look great. This one wasn't draining well. And even though we added more drainage holes, I just decided to go ahead and put a water loving plant in it. So I don't have to worry about whether it drains water or not. I pulled the tomato out of there and actually transplanted it into this container. And it's still a little bit not 100% looking, but I think it's gonna recover. And it is starting to flower, so that's a good sign. And of course, all of these broccolis, just, they're big and they're bold, and I'm not sure they're actually going to set heads, but I'm not gonna tear them out until they start to look terrible. And right now they don't look terrible. And you can see that nasturtiums, both over there and in here, are just rocking and rolling. I know I've said this before, but I have just never had nasturtiums look this good. So it's really exciting. I'm counting that as a win. Over on this side, all of the tomato, pepper, and cover crop combos in the veggie mix are doing really well. You could see the crimson clover is already starting to germinate, the bags that we seeded that in. And I'm sure by the time I get back, the peanuts, which are planted here, will also have germinated. So I'm really excited to be able to share this experiment with you. It's not really so much of an experiment because I've done this now for several years and it's just very successful and super easy. And at the end of the day, sometimes super easy is the lesson that we all need to lean into. Now, as you can see, the elephant garlics that I bought from Wegmans, the produce section, and just planted, they are blooming. I always let the elephant garlic flower because it'll still set an enormous bulb. And I just think that the flowers are beautiful and the pollinators love them. And coming along this edge, of course, I'm seeing a few more poppies to harvest. And I did get some more stuff put into this border. I planted some oregano and some senecio, and well, I'm hoping that all these random bedding annuals will just sort of, you know, take off and fill in and make this border look unique and beautiful. And over in here, this will be starting point for Emily on Monday to get larkspur harvested, get this corner cleaned up. And I'm so excited to be able to show you this at this stage, and then in the coming weeks show you the transformation of once it's cleaned up and replanted for the summer. And really, that's what my motivation is all about: keeping the garden going, changing it with great regularity, at least 2 times a year. And, you know, hopefully providing all of you inspiration so that you'll be able to do the same in your gardens. Did want to notice that the Bright Eyes Phlox paniculata is doing great after getting the Chelsea chop 2 weeks ago. Don't hesitate to do that if you have some perennials that kind of grow too tall and get unruly. Go ahead and give them a hard cutback, and I promise you, you won't regret it, because later in the season, you'll have twice as many blooms. Well, I do hope that you will tune in tomorrow for part 2 of the weekly garden tour, where I'll be showcasing everything that is growing out front. As always, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Happy gardening.